I remember January 6th. I sat there horrified, watching Americans use violence, destruction, and fury to overtake one of our nation's symbols of democracy. Never, ever, ever should we turn to violence to make our opinions and our frustrations with the government known. It was a sad day for America. It was a national tragedy. And thus, in the words of our beloved far-left liberals,
we never want a serious crisis to go to waste.
They're using that one event to completely redefine domestic terrorism and the tactics they plan to use to fight it.
The Republican Party is basically a domestic terrorist cell at this point.
There are millions of Americans who somehow need to be deprogrammed.
Forget Antifa, forget BLM, the way they ravaged cities, businesses, and livelihoods. Nah, it's us. We're the risk, all for having the audacity to search for the truth and question all those who are working overtime to hide it.
What's the first step of deprogramming?
We're such a risk, they're developing new security plans and working to eliminate our First Amendment rights.
In the Surgeon General's office, we're flagging problematic posts for Facebook.
Tonight, I expose their plans, their wish list to transform our free democracy into their dream authoritarian Chinese-like state. Tonight, Biden's new domestic terrorism threat. You.
Hello, America. Tonight, I bring an urgent threat your way. I've told you in the past, someday there will be a time when you won't recognize your country. I told you last summer, I think we're at that point. And then I told you in January, if you don't think you recognize your country now, you won't believe what it's going to be like this summer. Well, here we are in the summer. And let's wake up to what our country is becoming. The Biden administration has in the works to fight what it deems America's greatest national security threat, domestic terrorism, something that you cannot even fathom. That's what all of these this January 6th hearings are all about. It's to convince people that they need what I'm going to show you tonight. It all stems from the events in the Capitol, January 6th. Quick note, January 6th, nothing I say tonight should be read as excusing the people who smashed their way into the Capitol. I'm not bailing them out. Donald Trump isn't bailing them out. You know, Kamala Harris, she bailed out the people that were smashing buildings and burning things before. We didn't do that. I said from the beginning, those people should be arrested and prosecuted, not persecuted, fairly prosecuted. And the same goes for those on the left. The Capitol rioters handed the left a huge line of credit that Democrats have seized with both hands to use against their political opponents. I want you to remember, never let a crisis go to waste. So we're seeing a power surge in government outside of the purview of Congress and way outside of the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Capitol Police are now setting up regional offices in Florida and California, with others to be added in the near future. The Capitol Police, they say it's necessary to investigate threats to members of Congress. Really? Because, the FBI has 56 field offices all across the U.S. That's not enough already? Why are you expanding the U.S. Capitol Police to be a police force all around the country? Well, the U.S. Capitol Police say threats against members of Congress have more than doubled so far this year compared to 2020. The USCP, the Capitol Police, they're buying more police armor, surveillance, and rioting gear. It's now training personnel with the National Guard in Seattle and Virginia Beach. And it is also seeking a $107 million budget increase. That, despite the fact that in January of this year, even the Washington Post said that the U.S. Capitol Police already have a huge budget with little accountability. Last month, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin approved a request to loan the Capitol Police 8 persistent surveillance systems ground units. Now, what are these ground units? Well, the Army is going to install these units and train Capitol Police to operate them. These units capture high-definition video and have night vision to, quote, enhance the ability to detect and monitor threat activity. Okay. The Capitol Police has not said exactly where the new surveillance equipment is going to be used or if data will be stored and shared. It doesn't sound like a big thing until you realize that in June, a federal appeals court found that the Baltimore police were using pretty much this surveillance technology. And this judge found that it violates the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable search and seizure. Well, that sounds a little crazy. However, let me give you some facts. The independent study of the Baltimore police system found the technology allowed police to track people for multiple days. Unfortunately, we may never know how the Capitol Police uses a surveillance system like that on loan from the military, because it's exempt from the Freedom of Information Act, since it is part of the legislative branch. That gives the U.S. Capitol Police a level of secrecy that other law enforcement agencies don't have. Now, maybe it's just me, but I don't really find this statement from a recent Capitol Police press release very comforting. Quote, throughout the last 6 months, the United States Capitol Police has been working around the clock with our congressional stakeholders to pivot towards an intelligence-based protective agency. Wait, hang on. Do we really need a new intelligence service, a new intelligence agency working for Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer with no freedom of information? And why would this intelligence-based agency need to have military-installed surveillance technology to keep an eye on U.S. citizens? Well, let's have the new Attorney General, Merrick Garland, explain.
In the FBI's view, the top domestic violent extremist threat comes from racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists, specifically those who advocated for the superiority of the white race.
I don't see it that way, but if you missed that announcement from President Biden's new national strategy for countering domestic terrorism last month, you're not alone. Big media mostly skimmed right over this one, but we didn't. This is a massive transformation of national security policy. For starters, the White House makes a very bad case that white supremacy is the greatest domestic violent extremist threat facing the U.S. This is directly from the strategy report. Quote, domestic terrorist attacks in the United States have also been committed frequently by those opposing our government institutions. But then it only mentions 4 events. The 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, the killing of 5 Dallas police officers in 2016, the shooting of 4 people at the Republican congressional baseball practice in 2017, and the January 6th Capitol riot. Now, I could come up with a few more, like with the Weather Underground, but I'd have to go back another decade. But, I mean, they went back to 95. What's wrong with going back to 86? Mentioning just 4 events and reaching back to 1995 for the first example doesn't exactly scream frequently, but maybe that's just me. And then there's the fact that the Dallas police officers weren't killed by white extremists. They were killed in 2016 by a BLM activist. And the man who shot up the Republican baseball practice was a former Bernie Sanders campaign volunteer. So I just want to show you what they're doing here. They are conflating actual terrorism, the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, with hate crime events and with the January 6th Capitol riot. The White House says, quote, domestic terrorism is both persistent and evolving. Now, that's a great sentence, because what it really means is the definition of what constitutes domestic terrorism can evolve. When words are violence, when silence is violence, as the left continues to preach and teach to us both ways, a lot of ideas you don't like can suddenly be rolled into terrorism. Apparently, the Biden administration is declaring mission accomplished in the war on terror against Islamic extremism because radical Islam and jihad are nowhere to be found in this strategy document, which is kind of weird seeing that just last year in Minnesota, there were multiple federal indictments of people for providing material support to ISIS and Hamas. But again, quoting from the White House new strategy, among the wide range of animating ideologies, racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists, principally those who promote the superiority of the white race, and militia violent extremists are obsessed as presenting the most persistent and lethal threats. Wow. Let me be clear here. I mean, it's not like there are no white supremacists looking to do harm in America. There are. They're bad guys, and I don't like them. I'm pretty sure you don't like them. I don't like anybody who says, you know, my race is better than yours. Kind of sounds a little Hitlerian for me, and I'm kind of not into that. But it's confusing why this report shows no black national threats. Not mentioned in the report at all. But it's happening, like in April, when a follower of Louis Farrakhan killed a U.S. Capitol police officer and injured another by ramming into them with his vehicle. Why aren't they mentioned? Or how about the looting and arson of the 2020 BLM and Antifa riots across 20 states? They're not mentioned. Even though they cost over $1 billion in riot damage, they're not mentioned. Okay, so maybe this White House strategy isn't exactly thorough in evaluating the threats. But let's go back to the main idea. Quote, we cannot and will not ignore those dynamics, such as racism and bigotry, that perpetuate the domestic terrorism threat, end quote. This is insanity. The strategy does not define this racism and bigotry, but the Department of Homeland Security's training program on micro inequities says that colorblindness, the attempt to treat people equally regardless of race, is racist. And a denial of individual racism is just further proof that you're a racist. I'm not making this up. The federal government has adopted the definitions of Ibram X. Kendi, and the Pentagon now has a Kendi-like racism czar. Yes, we go to a man of the cloth. Go to Bishop Garrison. He is the new senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense for Diversity and Inclusion. This is a newly created role. And well, let's just look into him. What does he think about, racism in America? Well, he's not real shy about it on social media. In 2019, he tweeted this about Trump supporters. Support for him, a racist, is support for all of his beliefs. He's dragging a lot of bad actors, misogynists, extremists, other racists, out into the light, normalizing their actions. If you support the president, you support that. There's no room for nuance with this. There's no more, yeah, but I'm not like that talk. Oh, okay, so there's no nuance. It's black or white. Well, you better hope you're on the right side. I'm not. In April, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin also created the Countering Extremism Working Group in the Pentagon, and he made Bishop Garrison the point of contact for the effort. Now, one of the big things this group was tasked to is to revise the Pentagon's definition of prohibited extremist activities among uniformed military personnel. The group also was also instructed to provide new training on gray areas, such as reading, following, and liking extremist material and content in social media forums and platforms. You see, the problem is we're going to define some of those words differently. So what they're doing is the thought police. Kind of has that vibe to it, doesn't it? Exactly what does the Pentagon consider extremist material? And does that evolve as well? A pretty good clue comes from a leaked 17-page memo from DARPA at the Pentagon. That's the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. The memo includes a new category called patriot extremism. Now, the memo says this ideology holds that the U.S. government has become corrupt and has overstepped its constitutional boundaries or is no longer capable of protecting the people against foreign threats. Yeah, pretty much. pretty much, when we're releasing the Chinese spies, when we got the president's son, making out with Chinese spies, doing art for them. Yeah, I think they're probably not so good about protecting the homeland, and they have become corrupt. And I can read the Constitution. They are doing all kinds of unconstitutional things. I'll show them to you tonight. The first one was the Capitol Police. You don't do that. It's this kind of thinking that is just a normal Tuesday for about half the nation. By this new standard of patriot extremism, we're all extremists if you believe in the Constitution. And that may just be the point. Now, I have barely scratched the surface on the dangers in this new White House strategy. It's not a conspiracy theory. I want you to go to whitehouse.gov and look it up yourself. I'll show you how the strategy is already being played out next. All right, let me tell you a little bit about cybercrime. How much equity do you have in your home? 10,000, 50,000, 100,000? Have you paid it off? Cybercrime experts are alerting homeowners that the more equity you have, the greater the chance of foreign and domestic criminals coming after you. Home title theft is one of the fastest growing crimes, and it's really easy. And you can do it in Russia, and you can do it in China. You could do it in your jammies in mama's basement for about $30. You just say, they sold the house to me. You get the title transferred over to you, and it ain't that hard. And then you go to a bank and you take out a huge loan saying, yeah, I got all this money into this house. I'm going to take out a $100,000 loan. You're screwed. You don't technically own that house anymore. And if it happens to you, you're probably not going to find out for at least a year. And by then, the criminal's long gone. And when you find out, it's usually from a sheriff saying, you got to get out of the house. You don't own it. And that's the first time you've ever heard anything about it. Register your address right now and see if you're already a victim and receive a complete title history of your home, a $100 value free. Just go to HomeTitleLock.com. That's HomeTitleLock.com. I want to take you back to Woodrow Wilson, because history doesn't just repeat itself. It is repeating itself. And I want to tell you something that Woodrow Wilson did during World War I. The Justice Department under President Woodrow Wilson formed something called the American Protective League. By the end of the war in 1918, they had 250,000 badge-wearing members across the country who had been spying and intimidating, reading their neighbors' mail, and listening in on their phone calls, supposedly in an effort to root out the enemy. If you go back to that article, you will see back then they were saying, and they have over 1 million, maybe as many as 2 million people that are in the banking system all over the country that are helping them hurt these people, these Americans. The government arrested approximately 175,000 citizens for little more than criticizing it. Can you imagine? Well, of course you can, because it's happening now. April, Yahoo News reported on a secret program run by the law enforcement section of the Postal Service. It's a surveillance program. Your Postal Service is now an intelligence agency, too. That sentence doesn't work. But it's called ICOP. Cute. It stands for Internet Covert Operations Program, ICOP. The analysts searched through social media posts for Americans looking for inflammatory posts. When they found what they were looking for, the information was shared with other government agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security. Well, Yahoo News obtained a government bulletin, which notes that ICOP analysts had been mainly interested in, quote, right-wing leaning Parler and Telegram accounts. No. So far, it's still a mystery why the Postal Service has anything to do with monitoring social media. But they're not the only government agency that is jumping in on the surveillance train. In the White House's National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism that was released in June, there are 4 pillars of action that the government plans to take. I want to go over them with you. Pillar 1, understand and share domestic terrorism-related information. Apparently, the grave national security threat posed by white supremacy terrorists is so great, the government needs outside help. The strategy document says the Department of Homeland Security will introduce a new systematic approach for utilizing pertinent external non-governmental analysis and information that will provide enhanced situational awareness of today's domestic terrorism threat. So let me just run that through the bullcrap to English translator. It sounds a lot like the government is going to use certain private partners as special informants to spy where the government is technically not allowed to do itself. Gee, that sounds like Woodrow Wilson. It's interesting that just a few weeks after the White House released this new government strategy, Facebook users began receiving warnings about extremist content. In true Big Brother fashion, some users received a message asking, "Are you concerned that someone you know is becoming an extremist?" Other users got a message warning. "You may have been exposed to harmful extremist content recently. Violent groups try to manipulate your anger and disappointment. You can take action now to protect yourself and others." To protect yourself from what? Thought crime prosecution? I'm not brushing aside the real possibility that desperate people engage online with actual extremists with very bad intentions. That happens. But as I mentioned before the break, when the Pentagon has a new category and definition it calls patriot extremism, where its definition could evolve, it's a little more broader of a definition of extremism that could end up flagging a lot of innocent people. On Facebook, recently, we also learned the White House and even the Democratic National Committee are planning to work with SMS carriers to dispel misinformation about COVID vaccines that are sent over text messages. Now, I want my phone carrier working with the DNC to make sure I get the right messaging, don't you? I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Maybe they could even read through our messages, like a nationwide wiretap. If you're an unvaccinated right-winger, to many on the left, you are, quote, a threat to national security, who should be locked out of public places, end quote. The Surgeon General didn't go quite that far, at least yet, but he did release an advisory calling health misinformation a serious threat to public health. Here's the Surgeon General explaining the urgent need for this advisory.
Surgeon General advisories are reserved for urgent public health threats. And while those threats have often been related to what we eat, drink, and smoke, today we live in a world where misinformation poses an imminent and insidious threat to our nation's health.
This is unbelievable. How long will it be before this show has a Surgeon General's warning label? In the battle against insidious misinformation, the Surgeon General wants to impose clear consequences for accounts that repeatedly violate platform policies, which, of course, can be a version of locking a person out of a public place. I mean, how do you define misinformation? As America has seen throughout the last year and a half, sometimes misinformation is actually something your political opponents just don't want people to hear. CDC just went back on the whole testing thing, and they're back to everybody's got to wear a mask. Was it misinformation? When was this misinformation? The day after the Surgeon General issued his advisory on misinformation, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki made this stunning admission.
We are in regular touch with these social media platforms, and those engagements typically happen through members of our senior staff, but also members of our COVID-19 team. We've increased disinformation research and tracking within the Surgeon General's office. We're flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation.
Wow, what a surprise that they're in regular touch with Silicon Valley, seeing that most of them come from Silicon Valley in the administration. Free speech, the First Amendment, yeah, it's a little old and outdated. Might as well toss them. Here's the former Danish prime minister who is now a member of Facebook's oversight board.
How do you moderate content, and how do you find that balance between human rights and free speech, which is a human rights, but also other human rights, because obviously free speech is not an absolute human right. It has to be balanced with other human rights. And that is what the oversight is there to do.
Yeah, it's weird. Stalin said that. Fidel said that. Hitler said that. Mussolini said that. You know, I don't know about Denmark, but we're kind of fond of our free speech here, aren't we? Are we still? Let me go to pillar number 2 of the national strategy for countering domestic terrorism. It includes preventing individuals from being drawn into the grip of domestic terrorism in the first place. Really? Well, just like clockwork, weeks after the strategy was released, the FBI posted some curious tweets saying, quote, family members and peers are often the best positioned to witness signs of mobilization to violence. Help prevent homegrown violent extremism. Visit this link to learn how to spot suspicious behaviors and report them to the FBI. Oh, wow. Well, that link takes you to a booklet produced by the Department of National Intelligence, telling readers about warning signs to look for in your friends and family. Man, the left is so far ahead. Remember when we just wanted to do something about America and the Constitution? It took us months to put it together. It's a little bit creepy. Kind of reminds you a little bit of George Orwell's 1984. And in that novel, a man's own daughter turns him into the authorities when she catches him saying, "Down with Big Brother," in his sleep. Orwell writes, the children were systematically turned against their parents and taught to spy on them and report their deviations. The family had become, in effect, an extension of the thought police. It was a device by means of which everyone could be surrounded night and day by informers who knew him intimately. Now, bringing Orwell's 1984 up in this context may seem a little drastic as a comparison, and I hope it stays that way. But then there's this little nugget from the new White House strategy. Quote, even as we augment our approach to domestic terrorism under existing authorities, the Department of Justice is examining carefully what new authorities might be necessary and appropriate. New authorities? Are those like new shoes? Let's see. We've got the Postal Office doing the work for the White House. We have White House senior staff flagging people's Facebook posts. We have the FBI urging family members and peers to report on each other. What more could our authorities possibly want our government to do? I'll answer that question, unfortunately, next. Anything that I have ever said that was deemed crazy, I would like apologies from all of those people that said I was crazy. Look at what is happening in America, our own country. I never saw it coming. Yeah, well, we did. Another thing. Oh, yeah, gold. The dollar is fine. Is it? Is it fine? Let me tell you something. It's not fine. The catastrophic collapse of our currency system is coming. I don't know when, but it is coming. History is repeating itself. Acquire some precious metals, gold or silver. It's a hedge against the insanity that can come for us like a thief in the night. It seems especially real and present danger under the current spend-happy Biden administration and what the banks are doing and what the Fed is doing, what everybody seems to be doing. This week, Goldline is giving away free silver with their extremely popular $5 gold Indian coins. Every qualifying purchase, every qualifying order, you'll receive 10 brilliant uncirculated silver Kennedy half dollars at no additional cost. It's a great special. It's already a low-cost item, so if you're thinking about gold or silver, this might be the perfect promotion for you. They're standing by right now to take your call at 866-GOLDLINE, 866-GOLDLINE, or goldline.com. Here's the third pillar of the national strategy for countering domestic terrorism. Find it at whitehouse.gov. Disrupt and deter domestic terrorism activity. In the fight against foreign terrorism, this effort always includes disrupting the terrorists' finances. Again, quoting from the White House strategy, the Department of Treasury, in coordination with law enforcement and other interagency partners, is exploring ways to enhance the identification and analysis of financial activity associated with domestic terrorists, as well as enhancing engagement with financial institutions on domestic terrorist financing, including through existing provisions of the Bank Secrecy Act. What are they saying? Well, they don't say exactly how the government will use the Treasury Department to spy on Americans in its war on domestic terrorism, but we have some pretty good context clues. Earlier this month, for example, Judicial Watch filed a Freedom of Information lawsuit against the FBI to view the records of communication between the FBI and several banks. Bank of America reportedly gave the FBI financial records of customers who made transactions in Washington, D.C. on January 5th and 6th, and also the records including hotel and airline reservations in D.C., Virginia, and Maryland that were made after January 6th. Bank of America has not confirmed whether the FBI gave them a subpoena or they're just like, this might help. Through its FOIA request, Judicial Watch is seeking information on whether other banks, including Citi, Chase, Discover, American Express, also provided customers with financial records to the FBI. In June, the FBI told Judicial Watch that FOIA request, theirs was just too broad, really. And they asked for further clarification and a narrowing of the request. Yeah, here it is. Did you get financial data on everyone who was visiting the Capitol on those 2 days? Did you get it from the banks? It's just that simple. Well, after Judicial Watch complied, the FBI responded, we can't neither confirm nor deny such existence of any such records. Oh, well, that was helpful. Thank you. An overall concern about the Biden administration's new strategy is that the fight against domestic terrorism is going to turn into a witch hunt that could freeze innocent Americans out of the financial system and every other system. Now, it's a valid concern since many companies have already shown an open willingness, without even any government pressure, to shut customers based on their political views out of their system. Listen to this. Just last month, Wells Fargo shut down the bank account of Lauren Witzke. I don't know anything about her. She ran for U.S. Senate in 2020, Delaware's Republican candidate. She looks like she just has the wrong POV. Her account with Wells Fargo was shut down, left her with a zero balance, and left her stranded in Florida. She says when she calls Wells Fargo, they told her it was just a business decision. That's it. In June, somebody at the IRS leaked 15 years worth of tax returns of thousands of America's wealthiest people. They leaked it to ProPublica, a nonprofit investigative news outlet that have higher standards. Well, then they published the information, claiming it doesn't know who leaked the documents, but here they are. This breach of private data is kind of a huge deal. Yet America barely even flinched at the news because government agency scandals seem to be almost routine at this point, but they cannot become that to you. The IRS says it's investigating the leak. Meanwhile, the Biden administration slipped an $80 billion budget raise for the IRS over 10 years into the Democrats' infrastructure bill. Republican senators have negotiated that figure down to $40 billion over next 10 years. The IRS budget for 2021 is $11 billion. So this would increase their budget by 1/3 every year. Now, why do they need so much more cash? Supposedly because of the nation's massive tax gap. That's the difference between what taxes are owed to the government and what is actually paid. The IRS think there's $1 trillion in uncollected taxes each year. Yeah, maybe. I mean, have we gone and looked at the illegal aliens? Anyway, the IRS wants to know a lot more about you, and they need a lot more resources to shake America down for all that missing money. And Congress thinks that it will help pay for Biden's socialist infrastructure plan. So you got to spend money to make money, right? Isn't that what they always say? Those darn crazy capitalists. The irony of that massive leak of tax returns to ProPublica is that it proves why expanding the IRS is a horrible idea. America's wealthiest individuals and Fortune 500 companies have teams of lawyers and accountants devoted to helping them navigate insanely complicated tax codes and game the system. A new army of IRS agents won't find their $1 trillion there. They may find them with the small businesses and regular Americans who don't have all of the attorneys. In anticipation of the infrastructure money, the IRS is already hiring thousands of new auditors in its small business and criminal investigation divisions. The small business division alone will add 2,000 new workers by the end of September. Conservatives, anybody who just doesn't stand with what this administration stands for, you have a big reason to be nervous about a legion of new IRS agents coinciding with the White House's new strategy on domestic terrorism. The last thing a politicized IRS needs is thousands of additional agents. Let me take you back. You might remember a little scandal during the Obama administration in which the IRS was used to target Tea Party groups and other conservative organizations. You also might remember Lois Lerner, the former IRS director of Exempt organizations. She suffered a computer hard drive crash which erased 2 years of emails that investigators needed to see. And the NSA, of course, they don't have any of those records. Of course, darn technology. I hate when that happens. You'd like to think the IRS learned its lesson, but nobody taught them a lesson about targeting specific groups of Americans. Now, in May, the IRS denied a Christian nonprofit organization tax-exempt status because its biblical values are, quote, too Republican. The mission of the group, called Christians Engaged, is educating and empowering Christians to engage in America's civic process. Oh, slow down. That sounds extremist. The IRS rejection letter explains that the group was disqualified from a 501c3 exemption because you educate Christians on what the Bible says in areas where they can be instrumental, including the areas of sanctity of life, definition of marriage, biblical justice, freedom of speech, defense, borders, immigration, U.S.-Israel relations. The Bible teachings typically affiliated with the Republican Party and candidates. Well, finally, the Democrats come on out and say, yeah, we're not the party of God. We're not the party that believes in any of the principles in the Bible. These stories don't often have a happy ending, but in this case, after an appeal filed by our friends at First Liberty Institute, the IRS actually reversed the course and just 3 weeks ago granted tax-exempt status to Christians Engaged. And the accountants are just waiting to go over their books. For Americans of virtually any political stripe, there is a potential finance-related threat even greater than the politicized IRS. Putting government in charge of credit scores. I mean, really, Congress? Has the COVID wreckage not been enough for you that you now want to smite us with government consumer credit scores? There are bills currently making their way through the House, which would create public credit registry under the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. A recent Supreme Court ruling would allow a lawsuit to proceed against TransUnion. This is one of the 3 major credit reporting companies in the U.S. The lawsuit involves a California man who tried to buy a car. When the dealership ran his credit check, the man incorrectly turned up on a list of suspected terrorists. Eventually, over 1,800 people who had also been wrongly flagged as suspected terrorists joined the man's lawsuit against TransUnion. Now, what can we learn from this? If a private credit reporting company can screw up that royally, and then they're taken to court and have it turned around, imagine what a government credit reporting bureau is capable of, especially one that has the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the Postal Service, and every other governmental spying agency on speed dial. And when they screw up, who do you call? The Treasury Department expanding its reach, the IRS beefing up to milk you and your business for more cash, and now a government-controlled credit scoring system. You merge all of this with the spying efforts of external partners like big tech, and you have the perfect recipe for an American social credit system. What other tool would you need to make this leftist fever come to a reality? Unfortunately, I have the answer for that after the break. Right now, the best thing you can do is take the opportunity that is right in front of you and save money. You could save hundreds of dollars a month, possibly up to $1,000 a month, just by refinancing your mortgage. But please don't wait too long to call American Financing. You could miss out on the historically low mortgage rates. Hey, some of this stuff could come in and all of a sudden your credit's not so good. It's coming, America. Please get a free mortgage review from American Financing. Learn about custom loan programs that may fit your life better, how a shorter term for your mortgage can save you huge money in interest paid over the life of your mortgage, or how to access some cash to help you pay down the credit cards and shore up your credit. You'll be in a better position for whatever comes next in our economy. Please, please call them, American Financing. They have their mortgage consultants ready for you right now, and they'll help create a solution just for you. No pressure, no upfront or hidden fees. Call them today. Learn more. Find out just how much money you can save. You'll be glad you did. Call 800-906-2440, 800-906-2440, or AmericanFinancing.net.
The government's goal is to enable simple, fast, and convenient access to services anytime, anywhere, on any device. We're working with government and the private sector to build the foundation and standards for digital identity across Canada and internationally. The future is closer than you think.
Oh, it is much closer than you think. I can hardly wait. Digital ID. Imagine the possibilities, said every aspiring dictator in the world. Do you realize how dangerous all of this technology is in the hands of people who are just seeking power and not justice? Basically, digital identity is the online equivalent of the real identity of a person to use in all sorts of digital transactions. Of course, to establish a trustworthy link between you and your digital self. And it will require some sort of outside authority to authenticate that you are who you say you are. And once you're verified, your digital ID is a way just to prove it's really you when you make transactions online. That is great. Now, when you see slick videos like the one I just played, you might think, gee, that sounds great. That video was promoting Canada's digital ID program, by the way. So easy, so convenient. Who wouldn't want to get a digital ID? I mean, I'm not doing anything wrong. But who is going to be that outside authority to authenticate you? And then who's going to store and protect all that personal data? The government? Big tech? The government big tech hybrid? No, thank you. But like it or not, this train has already left the station. This time, the United Nations and the World Bank have initiatives to provide every person on the planet with a digital ID by 2030. And our friends at the World Economic Forum are also very passionate about digital ID. Here's Manju George speaking on a digital ID panel.
How we construct and use digital identities would determine how people are represented online, what opportunities they have access to, what or who is trusted online. So it's quite a foundational role that identity plays in digital economies and societies.
She said something there that I'm kind of like, Did you hear that? Digital ID will determine, quote, what opportunities people will have access to. Oh. And who is trusted. See, this gets to the heart of the dangers I've covered tonight. Sure, there may be all sorts of conveniences that come with having everyone having a digital ID. No, seriously, you can get through the airport a lot faster if you just give them a scan of your retina. What are you thinking? If you're saying the right things, you're associating with the right people and businesses, supporting the right party, you're all right. But what happens if you step out of line? And by the way, Democrats, you put all this stuff in, you better hope to God you win every single election from here on out. Because there is just as many people on the other side that just want power, and they will never let this power go. And they'll track you, and they'll round you up. Don't think that's true? Well, of course, the the ones that I keep thinking that rounded up citizens are all Democrats, but give me some more time. As convenient as digital ID may be, the switch can just as easily be flipped to lock you out of everything, especially if you're tagged as some kind of extremist. In his inaugural address as governor of California in 1967, Ronald Reagan said this: "Freedom is a very fragile thing, and it is never more than one generation away from extinction. It's not ours by the way of inheritance. It must be fought for and defended constantly by every generation. For it only comes once to a people. And those in world history who have known freedom and then lost it have never known it again." I thought this morning when I got up, I thought back about 2008 when I first had the idea of Mercury One, and it came from reflection in prayer, and I heard clay pots, and I didn't know. I'm like, what? You're talking to a dummy here. You created me. You know I'm not smart enough to figure that out. And I prayed and prayed and prayed, and over about a year, it had to do with our documents. That's why I'm working so hard to preserve and protect all of our documents and things that tell the American story, both good and bad. And because I realized clay pots, that's what they buried the Dead Sea Scrolls in. Once they decided what was in the Bible and what was out of the Bible, there was a purge, and they wanted all those documents to be gone that was out of the Bible. So we only know some of the things that used to be part of the scriptures that are out now because of the Dead Sea Scrolls. But I had a debate at the time, and I think I know the answer today. I thought of it this morning as I got up. I wondered at the time, do you mean clay pots as in keep these things buried and protected, or do you mean that our children are clay pots and put these values and principles deep inside of them? I think that's what we're supposed to do. And I pray to God we're not too late. I said to you in January, you won't recognize your country by the summer. Let me say, in another 6 months, it will be even more unrecognizable. We need your support. We need to stand together, and we need your support. Please join us at the BlazeTV. Become a family member now. Just sign up for the BlazeTV. We work so hard to give you the truth as we understand it. If you find any value in our work, please support us now. BlazeTV.com/Glenn. Use the promo code Glenn and save, I think it's 10%. Thank you so much for watching. We'll have more on this topic in the coming weeks and on tomorrow's radio. Good night.